Rain hammered the tin roof of the gas station, slicing the night into shards of silver. The fluorescent light flickered, throwing shadows across the cracked concrete. She stood there, a young black woman soaked to the bone, gripping a folded $7 bill in trembling hands. Her phone battery was dead, her bus long gone, and she hadn't eaten since morning. Yet she was staring at a man whose world looked far more dangerous than hers. The biker leaned against his Harley, his face hidden beneath a wet bandana. The bike's engine coughed weakly, like an animal trying to breathe through broken lungs. He cursed under his breath, rechecking the fuel gauge. Empty. His eyes met hers for half a second. Cold steel meeting quiet fire. "You got $1 or $2?" he asked, his voice rough but tired. He didn't look like a man used to asking. She should have walked away. Every instinct told her to. His jacket had the words, "Hell's Angels," stitched in red across the back. The kind that carried stories most people never lived to tell. But there was something in the way he said it. Not menace, just defeat. She looked down at her last $7. All she had to make it through the week. Her rent was due. Her fridge was empty. Yet, without saying a word, she stepped forward and pressed the crumpled bills into his hand. "Gas is cheap tonight," she whispered, forcing a smile. For a long second, the world stood still. The rain softened, the neon buzzed, and the biker just stared at her like she'd done something impossible. He filled his tank, started the engine, and before roaring off into the night, he said only one thing. "You just bought yourself some angels, girl." When the rumble faded, she stood there alone, unaware that by morning, the entire town would know her name, and 100 engines would come thundering back for her. Her name was Alana Brooks, 22, with eyes that carried more truth than her years should have allowed. Every morning, she woke before sunrise in her small studio apartment, where the ceiling leaked and the heater wheezed like an older man trying to remember how to breathe. She'd heat a cup of instant coffee, lace up worn sneakers, and walk 3 blocks to the diner that paid her just enough to keep the lights on. She was the kind of person who smiled at everyone, not because life had been kind to her, but because she refused to give cruelty the satisfaction of seeing her break. After her mother, Renee, passed away 3 years ago, Alana learned that grief doesn't vanish. It just knows to sit quietly beside you. Her mother had been a nurse, a woman of fierce compassion who'd never turned anyone away, no matter how little they could pay. When their small community clinic burned down in an electrical fire, Renee lost more than her job. She lost her purpose. Alana still remembered holding her mother's hand in the hospital, promising that someday she'd rebuild that clinic, even if it took her entire life. That promise became her North Star, even on the darkest nights. Around her neck hung a small angel pendant tarnished at the edges, engraved with the words, "Be the light." It was the last thing her mother gave her before she died. Alana never took it off, not while working double shifts at the diner, not while studying nursing textbooks at the bus stop, not even while crying herself to sleep some nights when the weight of the world felt too heavy. The people around her didn't see her dreams. They saw her struggle. To them, she was just another girl working too hard for too little. But inside, Alana held a kind of quiet fire, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, only the chance to do right. And that night at the gas station, when the biker asked for help, it wasn't pity that moved her. It was recognition, a flicker of humanity in his tired voice that reminded her of her mother's words. The hardest people to love are usually the ones who need it the most. So she gave him her last $7. Not because she had extra, but because she knew what it felt like to have nothing left and still keep going. As she walked home that night, her shoes squelching with rain, she held her angel pendant tight. Somewhere deep down, she whispered to the sky, "Mama, I hope you'd be proud." She didn't know it yet, but that prayer had already been heard by someone she least expected. The next morning, sunlight spilled weakly through Alana's window, catching the dust in midair like tiny, suspended hopes. She checked her phone, 3 missed calls from her landlord and 1 from her boss. Her heart sank. Rent was due yesterday. She pulled her apron over her uniform and jogged to the diner, breathless and late. The neon sign above the door hummed lazily, as always. Inside, the air smelled of burnt toast and cheap coffee, the scent of survival. "Morning, Alana," muttered her boss, Mr. Turner, without looking up from the register. His tone carried no warmth. "You're 2 hours short on your rent tab. I can't keep giving you extra shifts if you can't stay consistent." "I know," she said quietly. "I'll make it up. Just, things got tight this week." He sighed, counting coins with a clatter. "You're a good worker, but this isn't charity." She nodded, forcing a polite smile. Inside, the weight pressed harder. $7. That's all it took to tumble her careful balance. The act that had felt so right last night now echoed in her mind with doubt. What if kindness doesn't come back? By lunchtime, the diner was packed. Alana moved like clockwork, taking orders, refilling coffee, pretending her world wasn't collapsing. She overheard snippets from a booth, 2 regulars whispering, "You hear about that girl at the gas station last night? Some biker gang guy, Hell's Angel or something. My cousin said she gave him money. Is she crazy or just stupid? Probably both." Their laughter was sharp enough to cut through her apron. Alana froze for a moment, her cheeks flushing. News traveled fast in small towns, faster than truth ever could. When she got home that evening, her landlord was waiting by her door, tapping his boot. "3 days, Alana," he said flatly. "Then I changed the locks." Her voice trembled. "I'll get it to you." I swear, he didn't care. The hallway lights flickered out as he left, leaving her in the dark with the hum of broken promises. She sank onto the floor, back against the peeling wallpaper, and let the tears come. Not loud sobs, just the quiet kind that slipped down and carried exhaustion with them. She pulled her mother's pendant from under her collar and stared at it. The words, "Be the light," gleamed faintly in the gloom. That night, Alana worked a double shift, then cleaned the diner's floors after closing, scraping dried syrup and grease from tiles while the rest of the world slept. Each stroke of the mop felt like penance for a kindness that no one seemed to understand. On her walk home, she passed the same gas station. The puddles mirrored the neon glow, and for a heartbeat she thought she saw the biker again, the shape of a man leaning against the pumps. But when she blinked, it was gone. Only the faint echo of his words remained in her mind. "You just bought yourself some angels, girl." She shivered, not from cold, but from the strange ache of hope and fear intertwining. By the time she reached home, dawn was threatening the sky, washing out the stars one by one. She sat on her bed, counting coins from her tips, $6.42. Not enough for rent, not enough for groceries. Still, she folded them neatly beside her pendant and whispered, "Tomorrow will be better." But somewhere out there, on a road she'd never traveled, 100 engines were already roaring toward a promise she didn't know she'd made. 3 days passed like a slow storm, the kind that doesn't shout, but lingers, soaking everything until the ground gives up. Alana woke to the sound of a knock. Not gentle, final. Her landlord's voice came through the door, flat as a gavel. "Time's up, Brooks." She opened the door halfway, clutching her apron. "Please, just 1 more week. I'm waiting on my paycheck." He shook his head, eyes already elsewhere. "It's not personal, Alana. I got bills too." By noon, her things were in 2 trash bags at the curb, the sum of her 22 years reduced to black plastic. Her mother's old coffee mug clinked inside, the one that read, "Faith over fear." She wanted to throw it, scream, do something, but she didn't. Instead, she took a deep breath and kept walking. She ended up at the public library, her only refuge with free Wi-Fi and silence. The librarian, an older woman with kind eyes, let her sit near the back corner by the heater. Alana scrolled job listings on a cracked phone screen, every ad blurring into the next. Full-time, experience required. Background check. Reliable transportation. She had none of those. Outside, rain began again, relentless as memory. She pulled the angel pendant from her pocket, thumb tracing the worn engraving. The metal was cool, grounding. She whispered, "Mama, I don't know how much more light I have left." The next morning, she went back to the diner early, hoping to pick up an extra shift. But the help wanted sign was gone. A new girl was already at the counter wearing her apron. Turner didn't even look guilty. "Alana, we had to make changes. Business has been slow." Her chest went hollow. "So that's it?" He nodded. "It's not personal. It always wasn't." Until it was. She left without another word, the bell over the door jingling like mock applause. That evening, she walked the long way home. Not that she had a home anymore, but habit made her follow the same streets. Passing by the gas station again, she stopped. The same one where she'd given away her last $7. The puddles shimmered under the neon sign. The air smelled of gasoline and wet asphalt, a strangely familiar, almost comforting scent. There were faint tire marks, long and looping, darker than the rest of the pavement. She knelt, touching the cold ground where the biker had once stood. "Where are you now?" she whispered. "Did my $7 buy you a miracle too?" A low rumble of thunder answered. Over the next few days, her world shrank to the library by day and the church steps by night. The pastor knew her mother, sometimes leaving her a blanket or a paper cup of soup. She thanked him each time, even when her pride ached worse than hunger. Still, she refused to let bitterness settle. Each morning, she straightened her clothes, tucked her pendant under her collar, and told herself that things could change, that goodness returns, even if it takes the long road. But reality had teeth. One afternoon, she overheard two teenagers laughing as they walked by. "That's her," one whispered. "The gas station girl. Gave money to a biker gang. Dumb move." She turned away before they could see the tears streaming down her face. By the end of the week, exhaustion blurred her sense of time. She was hungry, cold, and yet somehow still alive. That quiet, stubborn kind of alive that refuses to surrender. She roamed one evening through streets buzzing with Friday night laughter that wasn't meant for her. Passing the gas station again, she paused under the same flickering light. The world looked exactly as it had that night, except emptier. The clerk recognized her and leaned out the window. "You that girl from the news?" he asked. "The biker thing?" She frowned. "News?" he shrugged. "Some guy came asking about you a few days ago. Big beard, tattoos, leather jacket. Left when I said I didn't know where you live. Said you saved his life or something." Her heart thudded once, hard. "Did he leave a name?" "Yeah, Mike, I think. Looked like trouble, the expensive kind." As she walked away, the pendant felt heavier against her skin. Trouble or not, someone out there remembered her. And that was more than most people ever got. That night, she found herself whispering the exact words she once heard her mother say in the hospital bed. "Light doesn't die. It just waits for someone brave enough to find it again." Alana didn't know it yet, but dawn was coming, and it would arrive on the sound of thunder that had nothing to do with the sky. The following week drifted by like fog, quiet, uncertain, and strangely peaceful. Alana had learned that when life stripped you down to nothing, you stopped fearing the fall. She'd started helping out at the church pantry in exchange for hot meals. Every morning, she swept floors, stocked shelves, and smiled at the people who came through. In their tired faces, she saw her own reflection, the invisible army of those who kept going. One Tuesday morning, while she was sorting canned beans into neat rows, the mail carrier came in holding a small envelope. "You, Alana Brooks?" he asked. She nodded, surprised. She hadn't received mail in weeks, not since she lost her apartment. The envelope was plain, with no return address. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. The handwriting was jagged, unsure, written in a pen that had smudged slightly as if from a trembling hand. It read, "Thank you for reminding me what grace looks like. No money." No explanation. Just that. For a long moment, she just stared at it. The paper trembled slightly between her fingers. It wasn't the words that undid her. It was the feeling that, for once, kindness had found its way back. She tucked the note inside her pendant chain and felt something shift. Not the world, but her heart. That evening, as the sun began to drop behind the cracked rooftops, she sat on the church steps watching the light spill gold across the street. The air smelled of gasoline again, faint but familiar. Somewhere in the distance, a single motorcycle engine growled. Her pulse quickened. She scanned the street, but the sound faded before she could see where it came from. Then another sound, softer, like wind, followed by the low rolling thunder of several bikes far away. It couldn't be. For a few seconds she thought she had imagined it. But the noise was real, faint but building, like a storm traveling over the horizon. She stood clutching the pendant at her throat. The air vibrated, heavy with something she couldn't name. Then silence. The night settled again. Crickets returned. A child laughed somewhere down the street, and Alana, standing in that warm dusk, couldn't stop smiling. Not because she understood what was happening, but because for the first time in months she felt seen. When she turned to go inside, the librarian from across the street waved from her porch, holding a small cardboard box. "Someone left this for you," she called. Alana walked over. Inside the box was a single black bandana, clean, folded, and tied with a red string. No note this time, no name, just that. She didn't know if it was a warning, a thank you, or a sign of things to come. But the next morning, the whole town would find out, because the sound of 100 engines would fill the air like thunder rolling down from heaven. The following morning began like any other, soft gray light seeping through low clouds, a hint of rain on the wind. Alana was sweeping the front steps of the church when the ground beneath her began to tremble. At first she thought it was thunder again, but thunder doesn't grow louder in rhythm, and it doesn't make windows rattle. People stepped outside, squinting into the distance. Somewhere beyond the hill, a low roar built into a deafening wave. The sound rolled closer until it became unmistakable. The growl of motorcycles, not one or two, but dozens. By the time the first bike turned the corner, the entire street had gone still. Then came another, and another. Chrome gleamed under the morning sun, black leather and steel cutting through the quiet. A sea of Hell's Angels flooded the narrow road, one after another, parking in perfect formation along the curb. Children pressed their faces to the windows. Store owners froze mid-sentence. The pastor came running out, half-dressed, his eyes wide. "Lord have mercy," he muttered. Alana stood frozen at the top of the steps, broom still in hand, the air vibrating with the thunder of engines. And then, silence. A single biker dismounted from the front of the pack. He pulled off his helmet. The same face, the man from the gas station, older up close with eyes like stone worn down by regret. His leather jacket bore a patch. Mad Mike, Vice President. He walked up the steps slowly, boots echoing against the concrete. The crowd watched, holding its breath. "Morning, Miss Brooks," he said, voice low but steady. "Didn't mean to scare you?" Her heart pounded. What is this?" He smiled faintly. "A thank you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A photograph. It showed him, months earlier, pale and broken in a hospital bed. Tubes, bruises, and a vacant stare. "That was me," he said. "Overdosed on the side of the highway 2 nights before I met you. They said I shouldn't have made it." She swallowed hard. "I'm glad you did." He nodded. "I was running from myself that night. I was going to ride until the tank ran dry and let whatever happened, happen. But then you—" He paused, voice cracking slightly. "You handed me $7 like I was worth saving." He looked back at the line of bikers behind him. "These men here, they don't follow easily. They've seen too much, done worse. But when I told them what you did, they said, 'We ain't letting that girl go unseen.'" From the crowd, several bikers stepped forward carrying something significant, wooden boards painted white bound together with rope. They laid them out on the ground in front of the church. At first, Alana thought it was a donation drive. But when they pulled back the tarp, she gasped. It was a signboard, hand-painted in bold black letters, the Renee Brooks Free Care Clinic, coming soon. Her knees went weak. She covered her mouth, tears burning her eyes. Mike's voice softened. "Your mom helped a lot of folks back in her day. Some of my boys remember her. We figured it was time we returned the favor." The pastor took off his hat, whispering a prayer. Alana fell to her knees, sobbing. I don't deserve this. Mike crouched beside her, his rough hand resting gently on her shoulder. You gave when you had nothing. That's rare, girl. You might think this is a gift. He looked at the other bikers, then back to her. But it's payback for faith. Faith like that doesn't die easily. As the engines roared again, the town stood silent. Some in awe, some in disbelief. Alana looked up through tears at the sea of leather and chrome, her mother's name gleaming in sunlight. Somewhere deep inside, she felt it. The sound of grace roaring louder than judgment. But what she didn't know yet was that gifts that arrive with thunder sometimes leave storms in their wake. The following morning began like any other. Soft gray light seeping through low clouds, a hint of rain on the wind. Alana was sweeping the front steps of the church when the ground beneath her began to tremble. At first she thought it was thunder again. But thunder doesn't grow louder in rhythm, and it doesn't make windows rattle. People stepped outside, squinting into the distance. Somewhere beyond the hill, a low roar built into a deafening wave. The sound rolled closer until it became unmistakable. The growl of motorcycles, not one or two, but dozens. By the time the first bike turned the corner, the entire street had gone still. Then came another, and another. Chrome gleamed under the morning sun, black leather and steel cutting through the quiet. A sea of Hell's Angels flooded the narrow road, one after another, parking in perfect formation along the curb. Children pressed their faces to the windows. Store owners froze mid-sentence. The pastor came running out, half-dressed, his eyes wide. "Lord have mercy," he muttered. Alana stood frozen at the top of the steps, broom still in hand, the air vibrating with the thunder of engines. And then, silence. A single biker dismounted from the front of the pack. He pulled off his helmet. The same face. The man from the gas station, older up close, with eyes like stone worn down by regret. His leather jacket bore a patch. Mad Mike, vice president. He walked up the steps slowly, boots echoing against the concrete. The crowd watched, holding its breath. "Morning, Miss Brooks," he said, voice low but steady. "Didn't mean to scare you." Her heart pounded. "What? What is this?" He smiled faintly. "A thank you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a photograph. It showed him, months earlier, pale and broken in a hospital bed, tubes, bruises, and a vacant stare. "That was me," he said. "Overdosed on the side of the highway 2 nights before I met you. They said I shouldn't have made it." She swallowed hard. "I'm glad you did," he nodded. "I was running from myself that night. I was going to ride until the tank ran dry and let whatever happened, happen. But then you—" He paused, voice cracking slightly. "You handed me $7 like I was worth saving." He looked back at the line of bikers behind him. "These men here, they don't follow easily. They've seen too much, done worse. But when I told them what you did, they said, 'We ain't letting that girl go unseen.'" From the crowd, several bikers stepped forward carrying something significant. Wooden boards, painted white, bound together with rope. They laid them out on the ground in front of the church. At first, Alana thought it was a donation drive. But when they pulled back the tarp, she gasped. It was a signboard hand-painted in bold black letters. "The Renee Brooks Free Care Clinic, coming soon." Her knees went weak. She covered her mouth, tears burning her eyes. Mike's voice softened. "Your mom helped a lot of folks back in her day. Some of my boys remember her. We figured it was time we returned the favor." The pastor took off his hat, whispering a prayer. Alana fell to her knees, sobbing. "I don't deserve this." Mike crouched beside her, his rough hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You gave when you had nothing. That's rare, girl. You might think this is a gift." He looked at the other bikers, then back to her. "But it's payback for faith. Faith like that doesn't die easily." As the engines roared again, the town stood silent, some in awe, some in disbelief. Alana looked up through tears at the sea of leather and chrome, her mother's name gleaming in sunlight. Somewhere deep inside, she felt it, the sound of grace roaring louder than judgment. But what she didn't know yet was that gifts that arrive with thunder sometimes leave storms in their wake. By the next morning, the town wasn't quiet anymore. Photos of Alana kneeling before the bikers flooded social media. Headlines popped up like wildfire. Hell's Angels surprise local waitress with clinic dedication. Gang or guardians. Bikers honor black woman's kindness. Every version twisted the truth in some way. At first, Alana tried to stay grateful. The clinic's promise filled her with a new kind of hope. But by the third day, that hope began to unravel. The diner's owner called her. "Alana, you need to come get your last paycheck. Folks are talking, saying you're in with a gang now. Can't risk the image." She stood there speechless, phone pressed to her ear. "You know that's not true." "Doesn't matter. People see pictures. They make stories." The line went dead. When she walked through town later, whispers trailed behind her like shadows. Mothers tugged their kids closer. Some men whistled mockingly. One muttered, "Maybe she's their new queen." The kindness that had once made her visible was now a curse that made her infamous. Even the church grew uneasy. The pastor, kind as he was, pulled her aside one evening. "Child, these men—" "They mean well, but their kind of gratitude attracts attention. I want you to be careful," she nodded. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," he said softly. "But blessings and burdens often arrive in the same package." That night, she sat on the steps outside again, watching the signboard the bikers had left behind. It leaned against the church wall, rain streaking its painted letters. The Alana Brooks Free Care Clinic. She traced her mother's name with one finger and whispered, "Mama, what am I supposed to do with a miracle that scares people?" The next day, the first reporter arrived. Clean suit, perfect hair, fake sympathy. He stuck a microphone in her face. "Miss Brooks, are you affiliated with the Hells Angels?" "No." "Were you aware of their criminal record?" "No. Then why accept their help?" "Because they offered kindness." The man smiled thinly. "Or power." The camera light blinded her. By the time he left, she felt dirty. Not from mud or sweat, but from how truth gets twisted when people want a better story. Later that night, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Stop talking to reporters," the text read. She frowned, heart pounding. Then another message came. "We'll handle it." M. She dropped the phone as if it had burned her. Handle it? What did that mean? The next day, 2 black motorcycles idled near the church for the entire afternoon. The riders didn't speak, just watched. Protective, maybe, but to everyone else it looked like intimidation. The mayor called the police. The police called the news, and suddenly, the act of compassion that had inspired hundreds now frightened thousands. By evening, her quiet town looked like a film set. Flashing lights, cameras, and cops who didn't know who the villain was supposed to be. Mad Mike showed up as the sun was setting. Leather jacket shining wet under the drizzle. "Heard you've been getting heat," he said. She crossed her arms. "You think?" He smirked faintly. "Didn't mean for this circus. But I don't regret what we did. I didn't want any of this," she said, voice trembling. "I just wanted to help one person." Mike looked away, jaw tightening. "And you did. But when you touch one life, others start feeling it too. Some good, some bad." She stared at him. "Then why does it feel like I'm paying for your redemption?" He met her eyes, raw, honest. "Because redemption's expensive. Always has been." Then he pulled something from his pocket. A minor silver key attached to a tag reading Renee Clinic, Storage. "They're building the place, Alana. Materials are paid for. Permits, too. You gotta decide if you're ready to own it." Her breath caught. "You mean it's really happening?" He nodded. "But people gonna keep talking. The cops will keep watching. You sure you're built for that?" She looked down at the key, then at the angel pendant resting against her chest. Rain dripped from her hair, but her voice came steady. "I'm not built for it. I'm built for healing." "And healing's never clean," Mike smiled faintly. "Then I guess the world's about to see what grace looks like with steel in its spine." He turned, started his bike, and the roar filled the empty street again. She stood there long after he was gone, the key cold in her hand, the pendant warm against her skin, 2 worlds colliding in her palm. Above her, thunder rolled again. But this time it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a beginning. That night, Alana couldn't sleep. The sound of rain drummed against the church roof, steady as a heartbeat. Every thought collided. The cameras, the whispers, the warnings. The silver key lay on the bedside table beside her mother's pendant, glinting in the dark like two small promises trying to outshine fear. She turned on the tiny lamp and opened an old notebook, her mother's journal, the one she'd carried for years but never dared to read. On the first page, in faded blue ink, was her mother's handwriting. "When I die, don't rebuild what burned. Rebuild what they forgot. Kindness." Alana closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. She finally understood. Her mother's dream had never been about walls or rooms. It was about people. The clinic wasn't just a building. It was a heartbeat. And maybe, just maybe, those bikers, men who'd seen darkness, were meant to help her bring light back. The next morning, she took the key and walked the 5 miles to the empty lot where the old clinic had once stood. Weeds clawed through cracked pavement, the ghost of a sign still faintly visible on the brick wall. Alana Brooks Family Care. The wind carried the faint rumble of a motorcycle somewhere in the distance, but it didn't frighten her anymore. She knelt on the ground, running her fingers through the dirt. "You see this, Mama?" she whispered. "Your clinic's coming back. Not perfect, not clean, but alive." Behind her, a familiar voice answered. "Didn't think I'd find you this early?" She turned. Mad Mike stood there, holding 2 coffees and a rolled-up blueprint. "Got something to show you," he said, handing her 1 cup. "Decaf. You look like you don't sleep much." She smiled faintly. "Not since the angel showed up." He spread the blueprint on the hood of his bike, a hand-drawn plan, rough but detailed. "The boys worked on this last night. We have contractors who owe us favors. It ain't charity, it's closure." Alana traced the lines with her finger, the exam rooms, the waiting area, the little corner labeled Renee's bench. Her throat tightened. "You did this?" He shrugged. "We did. Figured your mom gave us care once. Now we give it back." A gust of wind lifted the paper, and she caught it with one hand, laughing softly. For the first time in weeks, her laugh didn't sound foreign. She looked up at Mike. "People think you're dangerous." He met her eyes, calm. "They ain't wrong. But even wolves can guard what they love." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was sacred. As the clouds parted, sunlight hit the cracked sign above them. Dust danced in the air like tiny embers reborn. Alana felt something loosen inside her chest, a weight she'd carried since her mother died. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the folded note Mike had once left. "Thank you for reminding me what grace looks like." She pressed it into his hand. "You didn't need to repay me." "You already did." He shook his head. "Nah, Grace, don't stop halfway, Alana. You lit a fire. We're just making sure it doesn't die." For the first time, she believed him. As he turned to leave, she called out, "Mike!" He paused, helmet in hand. "Why me? Out of everyone, why stop at that gas station?" He smiled faintly, eyes softening. "Because that night I was going to ride straight into the river. But your $7 made me stop long enough to think maybe God still had a sense of humor." He started the bike and rode off, leaving her in the sunlight with tears that didn't hurt anymore. Alana knelt one last time, pressing her palm to the earth. "I get it now, Mama," she whispered. "Grace isn't what we get back. It's what we keep giving, even when it costs everything." And in that moment, surrounded by weeds and light and ghosts, Alana finally felt free. The day of the dedication began with a dawn that felt almost holy. The sky above the town burned in shades of amber and rose, the kind of morning that made even the tiredest hearts believe something good could happen. For the first time in months, the lot that had once been nothing but rubble stood tall again, freshly painted walls, expansive glass windows, and a sign that glimmered with sunlight. The Alana Brooks Free Care Clinic. Alana stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching a wrinkled piece of paper, her speech, folded so many times it felt like fabric. Around her, people filled the street, children on parents' shoulders, reporters setting up tripods, church members carrying bouquets. And in the distance, a low rumble began, that unmistakable sound that now carried both fear and wonder. The bikers were coming, 100 engines, lined in perfect formation, rolled down the street like a procession. Chrome caught the morning light, jackets gleamed with red insignias, and for once, no one ran. The townsfolk, who had once whispered behind closed doors, now stood in silence, a reverent hush beneath the thunder. Mad Mike led the line, pulling up in front of the clinic and cutting his engine. The others followed suit one by one, until the only sound left was the wind against the flag on the roof. Then Mike stepped forward, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. "You sure you're ready?" he asked softly. Alana nodded, her throat tight. "As I'll ever be." He gave her a small smile and motioned for the crowd to gather. The mayor stepped up first, trying to keep his composure for the cameras. "This town has seen many storms," he began. "But today we stand witness to something rare, redemption meeting compassion." Alana hardly heard him. Her eyes stayed on the sign, her mother's name painted in soft white. Every word of her speech fluttered away like ash, leaving only truth behind. When the mayor called her up, her knees nearly gave out. The crowd quieted. A single bird sang somewhere on a telephone wire. She took the microphone and exhaled. "I don't know what I'm supposed to say," she began, voice trembling. "I'm not a leader. I'm not anyone important. I'm just someone who gave $7 to a stranger because it was the right thing to do." A few people chuckled softly. Others wiped their eyes. "When my mom was alive," she continued, "she used to say that kindness doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to show up. That night at the gas station, I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to be like her." Her gaze drifted toward the bikers, a line of hardened men standing silent, heads bowed slightly. "What I didn't know," she said, "was that kindness travels faster than we think. It rides highways we'll never see. It finds people we'd never expect. And sometimes it comes back riding a Harley." Laughter rippled through the crowd, gentle, genuine. She smiled through tears. "When you lose everything, it's easy to believe the world's forgotten you. But I learned something. The world doesn't forget kindness. It just waits for the right moment to return it." She took off her angel pendant and held it up to the sunlight. "This was my mother's," she said. "She told me it reminded her that grace isn't about who deserves it. It's about who chooses to give it." Her voice cracked. "Today, this clinic isn't just for her. It's for everyone who's ever had to keep the light on in the dark. For the people who keep giving, even when no one's watching. This is for you." The crowd erupted into applause. The sound rolled through the street, rising higher than the hum of engines. Mad Mike stepped forward next. The bikers formed a semicircle behind him, heads bowed. "I spent most of my life taking what wasn't mine," he said into the mic, voice gravelly but strong. "Money, time, peace, you name it. Then one night a girl gave me $7 and made me feel like maybe I was still worth something. That's not just charity. That's resurrection." He turned toward Alana. "I never had a daughter. Lost her in an accident a long time ago. She'd be about your age now." His voice broke. "Guess God wanted to remind me what it felt like to protect someone again." The crowd fell silent. He took a small velvet box from his pocket and opened. Inside was a gold nameplate engraved with Alana Brooks' Free Care. Clinic, founded by Grace. "You built this," he said, pressing it into her hands. "We just held the hammers." Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. She hugged him, not awkwardly, not out of gratitude, but out of recognition. 2 lives, both scarred, finally stitched together by Grace. Cameras flashed. The crowd clapped again. Children ran to the front, waving little paper signs that said, "Thank you, Alana," and "Ride for Good." Then, as if on cue, the bikers roared their engines once more, not in defiance, but in salute. The sound filled the sky, echoing off the buildings like a chorus of thunder. Mike raised a fist, and 100 others followed. Alana stepped back, hand over her heart, pendant shining in the sunlight. For a single blinding moment, she saw everything clearly. Her mother's face, the diner, the gas station, the rain, and the man she'd once pitied but now thanked God she met. And in that roaring, trembling symphony of engines and hope, she realized something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. kindness doesn't just change others. It resurrects the giver, too. As the engines faded and the town cheered, Alana lifted her eyes to the sky, whispering, "We did it, Mama." And somewhere between the clouds and the sound of Harley engines fading into the horizon, it felt like heaven whispered back. Weeks passed, but the sound of that day never really left the town. Whenever a motorcycle passed through Main Street, people stopped what they were doing. They smiled, not out of fear anymore, but reverence. The same thunder that once made them lock their doors had become a song of gratitude. The clinic opened its doors quietly, without ceremony. There were no cameras, no reporters, and no speeches. Just people, mothers holding feverish children, older men with shaking hands, teenagers with scrapes and scars that needed more than medicine. And at the front desk sat Alana, wearing a white coat 2 sizes too big, a small silver angel pendant glinting at her throat. The first patient she treated was a man in his 60s who could barely afford his medication. When she handed him the bottle, he said softly, "I didn't think anyone like you would help someone like me." Alana smiled gently. "That's exactly why I'm here." Each day brought someone new. Each night, when the clinic closed, she'd stand outside under the flickering porch light, listening to the echo of engines somewhere far away. Sometimes she'd spot a distant flash of chrome at the edge of town, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. The town slowly began to change as well. The same people who once whispered started showing up to volunteer. The church donated blankets. The high school students painted murals on the walls of the clinic. One read in bold, colorful letters, "Grace rides loud." When she wasn't working, Alana spent her evenings writing letters, not to the press or officials, but to her mother. She'd write about each day, the laughter, the exhaustion, the quiet miracles that stitched her life together. Then she'd tuck the letters beneath a small wooden box under the reception counter, where her mother's photo sat smiling in a cheap frame. One night, near closing, she heard the familiar growl of a single bike. She stepped outside, and there he was, Mad Mike, helmet off, holding a cardboard box. His beard was grayer now, but his eyes had that same storm-soft calm. "Didn't think you'd show up again," she said, smiling. "Didn't think I'd ever stop," he replied. He handed her the box. Inside were papers, permits, ownership forms, all signed. "Clinic's yours now, fully legal, no strings." Her eyes widened. "Mike, this must have cost..." He shook his head. "Cost doesn't matter when you're buying peace." They stood in silence for a while, the summer wind warm against their faces. "Funny," he said finally. "Used to think angels were made of light. Turns out they're made of grit." She laughed softly. "And grease, apparently," he chuckled, nodding toward the clinic sign. "Your mom'd be proud. You built more than a building, girl. You built a bridge." When he left that night, she stood watching his taillight fade into the distance. It wasn't goodbye. It was continuation. 2 lives still rolling down the same long road, carrying the same message. That Sunday, the pastor asked her to speak at church. She hesitated, then agreed. Standing at the podium, she looked at the crowd, faces she'd once feared to meet, now filled with warmth. "I used to think kindness was a small thing," she said quietly. "Something soft. Something that gets crushed in a hard world. But it's the opposite. Kindness is the hardest thing you'll ever do, because it demands you give without knowing if you'll get anything back. It asks you to believe in people who've stopped believing in themselves." She paused, looking toward the open door where sunlight streamed through. "My mother used to say light doesn't erase darkness. It just refuses to leave it alone. That's what this clinic is." "A refusal," someone in the crowd whispered. "Amen," she smiled. "The truth is, I didn't save anyone. I just reminded one man that he could still be good. And he reminded me that the world still listens when we speak through love." The congregation rose to its feet. Some clapped, others wiped their eyes. That night, Alana walked home under a soft drizzle. The air smelled of rain and oil, the way it had that first night at the gas station. She stopped for a moment beneath the same flickering sign, now repaired. She traced her fingers over the small patch of asphalt where everything began. $7, she whispered, shaking her head. Guess that's what grace costs these days. A motorcycle passed in the distance, a single headlight cutting through the mist. She didn't turn to see who it was. She didn't need to. Inside, she sat at her mother's old desk and wrote her final letter for the night. Dear Mama, you were right. The light doesn't die, it just waits. And sometimes it finds its way back on the sound of engines, she smiled, folded the letter, and slipped it into the box. Outside, the thunder rolled again, not the kind that brings fear, but the kind that tells you someone's coming home. The road stretched endlessly beneath a blood-orange sky, the kind of sunset that makes everything, even pain, look as if it were part of a plan. The engines hummed in the distance again, low and steady, fading into the heartbeat of the horizon. Alana stood outside the clinic's front doors, watching the sun melt into the trees, her reflection glowing faintly in the glass that bore her mother's name. Inside, the lights flickered on one by one. The smell of disinfectant mingled with the warmth of fresh coffee. The walls were lined with children's drawings, bright smears of color, crooked hearts, tiny handprints labeled, "Thank you, Nurse Alana." In the center of the reception desk sat her mother's angel pendant, resting against the folded note that started it all. She picked it up, feeling the cool metal against her skin. It had dulled over the years, edges softened, but it still caught the light the same way, stubbornly, beautifully. She walked outside and looked down the quiet street, where the first stars had begun to appear. Somewhere far off, she could still hear the faint hum of motorcycles. It no longer sounded like chaos or danger. It sounded like a promise. $7, she whispered with a small smile. Guess that was the best investment I ever made. Her laughter drifted into the air, carried by the evening wind. In the distance, a single biker broke from the group and rode slowly past the clinic, helmet off, hair gray and wild. He didn't stop and just lifted a hand in salute as he passed. Alana raised her hand in return, the pendant swinging gently from her fingers. Their eyes met for half a second, two souls from different worlds bound by a moment that had rewritten both. When he disappeared around the bend, the sound of his engine lingered, softer, almost tender. And for the first time in a long time, Alana felt no weight in her chest, just calm, just light. She looked up at the sign once more. The letters shimmered in the fading glow. The Alana Brooks Free Care Clinic. Behind her, the church bell rang once, a clean, single note. Alana turned to lock the clinic for the night. Before closing the door, she whispered into the still air, "For every soul running on empty, may you find your next tank filled by grace." Then she smiled, flicked off the lights, and stepped into the dusk. The road ahead was long, uncertain, beautiful, like life always was, but she walked toward it without fear, her heart steady, her mother's words still echoing, "Be the light," and somewhere beyond the horizon, the thunder of engines rolled one last time, not as a warning, not as noise, but as a hymn, because sometimes grace doesn't whisper. Sometimes it rides. Sometimes respect takes flight in unexpected ways.